Hi, I'm Ted. I'd like to make this video about the Boeing YC14, which was limited designed. 2 prototypes were built, test flown in the mid-70s. I believe we started around 74. I was at Boeing Wichita at the time, and the government asked for and specified a medium-sized cargo aircraft in the stow configuration, which means short takeoff and landing. And the Boeing company was asked to design and build 2 prototypes, and so was the Douglas company. So the Boeing company built the YC14, 2 of them, and Douglas built 2 YC15s. They actually, this was a time when Boeing was, well, it was still Boeing, just to be frank. The designers, the engineers at Boeing showed just some brilliance in a totally different type of aircraft. It looked a little bit like a C-130 with the nose, and back ramp, of course, was just common with any of these aircraft that had that type of configuration. 2 engines, basically Boeing 747 size engines, well above the wing, and it was an incredible airplane. The YC-15 was built with 4 engines as specified by the Air Force, but they were 2 different sizes. And that, as you'll see in the video, makes it look kind of strange, but it also adds a very serious logistics problem for the Air Force as far as their maintenance and maintaining the aircraft. They have now 2 different type engines, 2 different sizes of engines. So logistically it's a nightmare for them, and for the maintenance people, they got to know 2 engines now instead of 1. So it just complicates things. The YC-14 was built in 74, basically, 75, flown and tested in 76, 77, and it was done with this flight test program in 77. It passed everything with exceptional performance. The YC-15, on the other hand, basically failed almost every test that was given. It took time. The YC-15 got hung up in Alaska during the cold weather test because they just couldn't get it going. Another thing with the problem with YC-15 is it was an off-the-shelf design that Boeing had in the archives, and it wasn't really large enough to carry the tanks that it was designed for at that time. And of course today the new tanks are so much bigger that it wouldn't matter anyway, but at that time it was designed for the state-of-the-art tank. The program was canceled by President Jimmy Carter. I'm not sure why, but I think there was really a push to make sure that Douglas got the contract, and when they didn't perform, plus you got to remember he's from Georgia, and Lockheed builds the C-130, and this would have cut into the C-130 production. The C-130 has proven to be an exceptional airplane, many different configurations, very worthy, self-reliant, just an incredible aircraft, incredible history with the aircraft. It's been in production since the early 60s. And, well, I'll tell you what, just not very many can say that. Anyway, the video is going to show you the performance of the YC-14, and I'm sure you will be impressed. Why did Boeing not get the contract? I think some of it is basically an arrogance that they have had and continue to have relative to accomplishing the task. It was specified to be a multi-engine airplane, not a twin-engine airplane. Now you say, well, 2 is multi. Well, it's not in that vernacular. It's a twin-engine. I've been on 5, maybe 6, I guess, 6 new airplane programs in my career, starting in 1960 and through 2003. So for those 43 years, I got to see everything from business aircraft to private jets, to a Mach 2 aircraft, to the YC-14, which I'm very proud of, to an invisible bomber, the B-2, Boeing 777, and several diversions or derivatives, several derivatives of these aircraft, especially within the 777 family. Boeing company, in their arrogance, past and present, decided that they knew better than the customer. They do this in the commercial world too, and it gets them in trouble a lot of times. So the government, the Boeing, decided that they don't know what they need, they don't know what they want, and so we're not going to build a multi-engine airplane, we're going to build a twin-engine airplane, we're going to show them how good this is. Now, the problem with a twin-engine airplane in those days is they didn't have a jet engine that I know of that was so reliable that they could trust it to get halfway across the Pacific Ocean, and if one engine
The decision to send the number 2 YC14 prototype to Europe for a month of operational testing and evaluation was quite a challenge to the airplane with its many technically advanced systems, a challenge for planning the support of this operation. This isn't like any conventional Air Force deployment. There are only 2 of these airplanes in the world, and if anything went wrong, our main source of support would be almost halfway around the world. This was the first time the whole world got a good look at the YC14, and it is possibly an understatement to say the world was impressed with its performance. What the world didn't see was a month-long operation, over 70 flight hours, 177 STOL landings at 19 different bases in 5 foreign countries and the United States without a single delay. Our first leg was from Edwards Air Force Base to Wright-Patterson, the home of the Aeronautical Systems Division. Many of the people who have spent years working on the AMST program and in developing STOL technology got their first look at the landing capability of the YC14. This was an historic first, the first time the 2 competitors in the Air Force's Advanced Medium STOL Transport program had met and been parked side by side. Our prospective evaluators got a good look at both airplanes and their performance. On to Mildenhall, England, by way of Loring Air Force Base, Maine, and Keflavik, Iceland, where the YC14 participated in the Silver Jubilee celebration for Queen Elizabeth. The crowd of over 125,000 on the first day of flight demonstration was very impressed with the quietness of the over-the-wing engine design when it started directly in front of them and backed up to taxi out for the demonstration flight. They were equally impressed with its steep approach and short landing roll. The ground maneuverability was demonstrated again by backing on the runway, and then another takeoff. The rapid roll to the left on takeoff caused many people to gasp, thinking perhaps that for such a maneuver to be performed by a transport airplane, it must be out of control. It's not, of course. The Paris Air Show is the grandfather, the most prestigious of all the aviation expositions. The YC-14 was prominently displayed between the Russian static exhibit and other Boeing airplanes, the AWACS and the T-43. The President of France was there for the opening ceremonies and had a chance to see our flying demonstration. Monsieur Lafont, Director General of the Paris Air Show, was so impressed with the YC-14 that he honored it with the number 1 and our choice of flight demonstration times. What was especially impressive throughout the trip, but especially at Paris, was the variety of ground servicing equipment used by the YC-14. Compatibility with U.S. and NATO equipment was, of course, one of the objectives of the test. All takeoffs were made using 600 to 800 feet of runway. The immediate roll into a tight climbing turn simulates a combat tactic to keep the airplane well within a defensible perimeter. The radius of this turn is only 800 feet, and a complete 360-degree turn is completed in just 25 seconds. The YC-14 is pulling 2.4 Gs and climbing at almost 6,000 feet per minute. This seems to nearly violate the laws of physics, at least as we think of the performance of current generation transport aircraft. This performance is the result of several technology improvements in digital electronic fly-by-wire control systems and powerful modern high bypass ratio engines. Landing distances of 600 to 800 feet were also demonstrated repeatedly. The YC-14 left in the middle of the Paris Air Show for a few days to continue testing at Rhine-Main Air Base, where General Crichton, commander of the 435th Tactical Airlift Wing, was given a tour by the AMST SPO director, Colonel Kischlein. U.S. Army and German military personnel were also exposed to the YC-14. This 40K loader was loaded and flown from the Rhine-Main to Ramstein Air Base. It is the longest single vehicle ever loaded in the YC-14, over 40 feet. While not the heaviest load, this flight gave us the highest gross weight takeoff of the trip, over 213,500 pounds. At Ramstein Air Base, Germany, another phase of testing was completed as the YC-14 backed under its own power up to the 463L air transportable loading dock. In a tactical resupply situation, palletized cargo would be marshaled on the dock and 7 pallets rolled rapidly onto the YC-14. General Ellis, commander of the United States Air Force in Europe, got a close look at the unique flap system on the YC-14, which is responsible for its outstanding short-field landing performance. Until our arrival at Heidelberg, the weather had been relatively good. The airfield is in a valley surrounded by hills and is only 3,500 feet long and less than 100 feet wide. The effectiveness of the thrust reverser, putting a downward load on the gear, made this landing hardly distinguishable from those on dry pavement. This waterspout is a natural phenomenon created by the high-thrust General Electric engines. The YC14 turned off the 3,500-foot runway at the 1,500-foot mark. In fact, all our flying demonstrations at Heidelberg were conducted in the first 1,500 feet of the runway. This was the Army's turn to get a first-hand look at the next generation of tactical transports. General Blanchard, Commander, United States Army in Europe, and Major General, now Lieutenant General Gregg, were among our distinguished guests. On this particular takeoff roll, there was 2 inches of standing water on the runway. Staying low and inside the surrounding valley called for a modified but no less impressive flight demonstration. The ceiling at Heidelberg was 900 feet and ragged. The roll rate on that turn will be shown again. This is another aspect of the performance and handling characteristics of the YC-14 that sets it apart from all other transport aircraft. At Andrews, the YC-14 makes a nodding acquaintance with Air Force One. We had the pleasure of offering the left seat to many Air Force, Congressional, and Department of Defense visitors, and many more had an opportunity to ride in the airplane. Our senior visitor, and pilot for that matter, was Secretary of the Air Force Stetson. Another record for this prototype aircraft was established at Andrews as we flew 7 sorties in one day, again with no delays. At Scott Air Force Base, General Moore, commander of the Military Airlift Command, and his staff turned out to watch the YC-14 go through its paces. Later, they too would have an opportunity to take the controls and perform the same maneuvers for themselves. There were actually 7 variations of the flight demonstration that had been planned and practiced by participating Air Force and Boeing pilots. This series starts with the usual short takeoff, quick maneuver turn and tight climbing spiral, followed by a rapid roll and reversal of direction. These roll rates have been measured at 72 degrees per second, something like fighter aircraft performance. That's Ray McPherson out in front, Boeing's senior project pilot on the YC-14, who had the narrating duties at Scott. Although we did not have the opportunity to measure this landing, we timed it at under 6 seconds on a relatively calm day. That computes conservatively to under 500 feet. After a flying show like that, the response from our visitors was most enthusiastic. The airplane was also greeted by an enthusiastic Army and Air Force crowd at Pope Air Force Base, adjacent to Fort Bragg in North Carolina. In addition to the tight spiral climb shown earlier, this slow flight characteristics and advanced flight control system also allow it to fly a tight descending spiral, again to keep away from small caliber arms fire and allow a smaller defense perimeter around the landing area. By now, these STOL landings look routine, and they are, but every demonstration was programmed for at least 2 of them. With landing performance like this, we had to convince each new audience that the first one wasn't just luck. Loading demonstrations at Pope included 2 of these shop vans and the M551 Sheridan tank. These add to the wide range of wheeled and tracked vehicles already load tested in the YC14. By the time the number 2 rejoined its sister ship and the test program at Edwards, a long list of impressive statistics had been generated. It's hard to single out the most important. Flight performance is certainly high on the list. Maintenance we've hardly touched, but it works out to 16 maintenance man-hours per flight hour. 30 days, 177 STOL landings, 70 hours, over 13,000 miles, and a lower maintenance man-hour figure than similar aircraft experienced in Vietnam. What it all adds up to is that the YC-14's achievements in technology and performance produce one very important result: reliability.